your body thinks that it's still sunlight.
Entrepreneurship. You cannot build a business without having people around you that not only are part of your team.
About is they purchase this sofa and they take it with them across the city, across Toronto.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Restless Millennial podcast, the voice of the motivated youth. Today I'm here with Nicholas Arnold, who is a writer and a director, and he is here today to talk about leadership and using your talents to influence and inspire. So first of all, thank you, Nicholas, for being on the show today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate having you on.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I respect what you do with the Restless Millennial, so I'm happy to be here.
Thanks very much. And so first of all, you're many different things, and you're a writer, like I said, you're a writer and director. Mm-hmm. And you've also done some public speaking right now. So before we get into the leadership and that kind of stuff, could you just talk a little bit about how you kind of ended up in these roles?
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things I talk about when I talked about leadership and all that sort of thing, or going for your dreams and that sort of stuff, is being open to going with the flow. None of us are who we were when we were teenagers. Right. We're always growing and changing, and it's silly, especially if we had a dream or a desire or a goal that we wanted to attain when we were a teenager. It's silly to assume that always has to stay the exact same. And so I struggled with that a little bit because I'd wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 5 years old. But as I grew and changed, I also wanted to do some of these other things. I enjoyed performing. I enjoyed speaking in front of an audience. I like writing. And so it became this sort of conflict of, well, can I do all these things? Do I have to focus my energy on one thing or the other? So over time, I just sort of literally fell into each role naturally and organically. It was if I wanted to do something, then I just kind of did it. And over time, it's like, I'm a writer now. You know, I've published some articles, okay, over time, I'm a filmmaker. I've made films, that sort of thing. So it happened organically just by going with the flow.
And you're a graduate of the Vancouver Film School.
I am, yeah.
So would you say like film was something that you always wanted to do from an early age?
Yeah, like literally from the age of 5.
Producing films or acting in films?
Well, when I was 5 years old, I had no idea what the roles are, but I knew I wanted to be the person behind that magic. And so I was making little movies with my siblings from the time I was 5 years old. And so it had always been a dream, and it's only actually since graduating film school and getting out into the real world that I started exploring other aspects of the arts, like performing and writing and that sort of thing.
How did you kind of end up in the public speaking realm of things?
I'd always liked public speaking, but that came more recently, within the last few years, with a show I'm doing in particular. It's a tribute concert show. Where I'm Nick on stage. So a lot of the acting and performing I had done, I'm playing roles, but this show allowed me to be myself on stage and talk to an audience as myself. And what I realized is I loved doing that. I loved breaking that fourth wall and having a connection with a group of people. And so it became this question of, well, how can I do more of that? And well, there's a whole world of public speaking out there that you can get into, right?
So what are kind of some ways that you became more comfortable with public speaking early on? Did you join like a group? Like I know there's Toastmasters and stuff like that.
Luckily, I had a lot of the tools from an early age.
Previous experiences?
Yeah, from previous experiences. I'd done some of the public speaking competitions that many of us do when we're young. In school and all that sort of thing. We had in my actual elementary school, it was part of our curriculum to do speeches, right? Yeah. And so I did that, and I did well with that. So I had the tools there and sort of the basis of doing it. And I had also just, with some of the charity work I'd done, naturally became a speaker and an advocate for the various causes I was raising money for over the years. And so the tools were already there, and it was just a matter of now packaging that and presenting it as something that can be sold.
You created your first film at age 14, is that correct?
Yeah.
And what was that about?
So that film, that was a short film. It was a documentary. A friend of mine had muscular dystrophy, which is a degenerative disorder, eats away at the muscles over time. And I made this film about him and about his life. And in doing so, kind of also became an advocate for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and the film ended up raising money for that cause, and that also is what led me a little bit into that sort of fundraising realm. Yeah.
Cool. And right now, I know you're doing this speech called Impossible Dreams. Mm-hmm. So could you just talk a little bit about that and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, so the idea with the Impossible Dreams right now, I think with the way that the world is, it's a very cynical place to live in, or it can be if you choose to look at it that way. And I think what we need to do now more than ever, and it helps with things like the Restless Millennial and other endeavors is encourage you to actually go for impossible things or seemingly impossible things. When we live in a world that can be very cynical, we tend to sort of crush ideas and dreams.
Like kind of like comparing yourself to others, that kind of thing?
On an individual basis, yes, but literally the world as it is politically. And,
Right.
you know, I was talking with a friend about, you know, just the state of the world and they were lamenting over how everything is. And I said, yeah, but there's a lot of good things happening. And I mentioned March for Our Lives and the Women's March and all that sort of stuff. And they said, yeah, but that's not going to do anything. Because the people who are in power have too much power. Right. So that's what I'm talking about, is there's a general sort of cynicism around the world. And that's a very easy thing to believe and feel, just with the way we're fed everything in the media. And it's easy for youth to believe that as well. So if you have youth who are looking at everything and going, yeah, but this is impossible to change. Or my goals and dreams of, making an impact or changing the way the world is right now are impossible. We need to curb that. We need to actually show them that, you know what? No. You can go for these impossible things and make them happen. So and we do that in small ways.
How would you define an impossible dream? Like something that, you know, that most people would say, oh, you can't do this?
That's exactly it.
Right.
That's exactly it. It's the type of stuff where if the voice in your head is whispering at you and saying, like it would be much easier for you to stay at home and not, you know, Netflix and not do anything. Then that's where we want to start encouraging and empowering youth to look at that and go, give it a shot.
And it's a hard voice to kind of get out of your head. I know everybody deals with it. I've dealt with it myself. What are some kind of like habits that you like preach to people of how they can get past that voice in their head that tells them, no, I can't do this. It's too big. It's too challenging.
Yeah, well, you hit on it exactly. Social media right now. Social media is an incredible tool. This is literally an aspect of it, what we're doing right here.
It is.
But it can also be detrimental with how it's used. Like everything, if things aren't used with moderation, then they become dangerous. And one of the things with social media is that aspect of comparing yourself to others, right? If you remove that, if you limit the time that you're on Instagram and all this stuff where you're comparing yourself to these others who are so much better than you and have better lives and better luck and better success, then you can actually just focus on yourself, and deal with that sort of negative self-talk, which will be a lot lesser if you remove those outside
So are you saying
sources.
People should shut out social media completely or just kind of use it for like
moderation? It's all about moderation. It's silly in today's world.
It's like dieting, I guess.
Yeah, it's silly in today's world to be like shut it out completely. Like
can't.
Remove yourself. Yeah, you're going to set yourself up for a bit of depression and fear of missing out and all that sort of thing, right? FOMO, as they call it.
Is that
right?
really a term?
Fear of missing out.
Wow.
Yeah. Hashtag FOMO. So it's just about like how much are you going on there?
Right.
Are you is social media controlling you? Are you giving up the first hour of your day and the last hour of your day to social media? Is it the first thing you check?
In your life?
What kind of like in general? That's a great question to ask. But in my life, it is something that I try to discipline incredibly. I use it a lot. Mm-hmm. I have to for the type of work that I do, just as an arts-based performer. If no one sees your stuff nowadays, then you're not getting anywhere with it. But it's something I actively try to discipline, and some days are better than others with that.
I can speak to that
right?
too.
So one of the things I don't have the apps on my phone.
Really?
So if I'm going on, it's for a purpose, and I try, and then that also triggers it in my brain. If I'm going on, if I'm logging on via a web browser, it's like, Nick, do you really need to be going on Facebook right now? What is the purpose? Is it to touch base and communicate with people? Great.
So you don't have any apps on your phone at all? Any social apps?
The social apps I remove. Yeah.
So just on your computer.
Yeah. So then it becomes it becomes a sort of conscious decision of like, do I need to go on here right now? What is the purpose? Is it just to connect with friends? Fine, but then let's limit the time that I'm on there, so I'm not all of a sudden losing an hour of my day because I was, scrolling through Facebook profiles.
That's an interesting perspective. I think I'm going to try that too and see how it kind of works.
It's all just about making it work for your life, right?
But another thing you talk about in your speeches is leadership as well, leadership and goal setting. So one of the questions I want to ask about leadership is do you think that it's something you're born with? Like, are you born with leadership traits, or is it something you can learn?
I'm sure that there's... That's a complicated question because I'm sure that there's people that are born with that. Just as someone is seemingly born, you see 3-year-olds who are piano prodigies, right? So there's got to be an element of like, well, okay, they were born with this gift or the ability to absorb and learn really quickly. But I think it's also something that anybody can learn. Like, I wouldn't want to limit that and be like, it's something you're born with, because that also just perpetuates negative self-talk, where it's like, oh, I'm not a natural leader. So-and-so's a natural leader. I can't do it. It's something I learned over the years, whether it was within me naturally. I'm sure there's elements that were, but it's absolutely something that qualities that anybody can learn.
And in your opinion, what traits do true leaders possess, and how did you kind of improve your leadership abilities early on in your life?
Yeah, well, leadership, I think, it's a very hard thing to define.
Right.
Actually, if you even just Google what the word leadership means, it's jumbled. Like, there isn't really a solid definition of it, other than like someone who's in charge of people, which is so limiting. Because I think leadership is really about helping people move towards something different, motivating and helping people move towards a different outcome, or a different expectation or things like that. So what qualities are with that? I mean, I think there's a difference between a manager and a leader. A manager is that person who's in charge, and manages and all this sort of, in some cases, micromanages and all that sort of thing. A leader is encouraging someone to discover on their own, make mistakes on their own, and succeed on their own. They're behind and supporting, and they're going to be there, but they're allowing that person to also grow. Whereas a manager, it's more about, these are my minions. Not always,
and if you fail at something, you get like a scolding for it.
Exactly, right. It's more sort of militaristic in that sense. But I think a good leader is going to actually encourage someone to discover those things on their own.
What are some lessons you learned early on that made you a better leader? Do you have anything in particular?
Well, that exactly. I mean, I think back in the day, at some point when we become leaders, let's say we're a supervisor at our job or running an event and we're in charge of it, there's a certain ego boost that gives when we're very young, especially because, wow, everyone's looking to me as the guy to solve all these problems. And when I learned to let go of that, and it wasn't about my ego anymore, and it wasn't about serving my ego as the guy who's in charge, as the guy who put all this together, I became a better leader, because now it was about, I was just another spoke in the wheel. I just so happened to be the guy who troubleshoots and this and that and the other thing, but I'm just as important as the person who holds the door at the event or tears the ticket or this, that, and the other thing, right?
So you kind of shifted your focus away from yourself and onto that
bigger picture stuff.
Leading.
Yeah. And that, I mean, you asked like what kind of stuff led me to learning that? Right. Failure.
Is there anything in particular that you remember?
Oh, God. Big times. Yeah. I mean, I've failed in every aspect. You listed the things that I've done, and every aspect of those have come out of massive failure on an individual basis and as a group level. I made a feature film when I was in high school. By the time I graduated high school, I had made this film. So I spent about 3 years doing it. And I remember this one day, we had trouble we shot during the summer. And we had a lot of difficulty filling the school to look like it's full, getting background extras to come and volunteer their time. And we had this very, very big scene. It was a school dance scene, like a semi-formal.
We needed a lot of people for those.
Needed a lot of people towards the end of the summer. And so we were working hard at getting people to show up and that sort of thing. And the day arrived, and it's the biggest turnout we've ever had. We had hundreds of kids in this gymnasium. We spent the whole morning setting up, doing all that sort of thing. And that's when I discovered I had made the mistake of running out of footage, running out of tape.
Oh, because back then you would use tape.
We were using tape. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it wasn't digital like it is now.
How does that work? So you have like a film reel, and then if you run out, you run out?
So we were sponsored by a TV company, and so this was a special broadcast quality tape, which, to make matters worse, wasn't available over the counter.
Oh, okay.
So we couldn't just go out and buy a new tape on the day of. And it was a Saturday, the TV station was closed, I couldn't get a hold of the producers, and I looked at, could we tape over anything? And if we did, with the amount of stuff we had to shoot for this dance scene, we'd be losing weeks of footage. And so I was 15 or 16 at the time, and we had a radio DJ, one of the local radio hosts had come to do a cameo, and he was going to DJ the dance, and he had arrived giving up his day to do this. And they'd been sitting around, hundreds of kids in the gymnasium for about 3 hours, and I finally was like, we can't film today. And I stood up on the bleachers, thanked everybody for coming, and sent them all home, and just felt like absolute crap, because this was a simple mistake
And how did this story
that I
end? Did
had
they end
made.
up coming back and
We did it, and we finished the
reshoot
film,
again?
and we did all that. So it ends on a positive, but there was also 2 days of sort of hard depression of wanting to quit. I think I curled up in bed for like 2 days and canceled the next few shoots and that sort of thing, because we shot for 57 days with that film. So when you're 15 and 16, that's huge. So there were always little moments like that you realize, well, of course I failed. I was hogging all the jobs. Like I was trying to do everything. If I had delegated, if I put someone in charge at the beginning of being in charge of footage, hey Nick, we got the big dance scene in a couple days, and looks like we're running a little thin, But instead, I was managing. I was a manager. I wasn't a leader at that point, and the results were, well, I sent a few hundred kids home.
Did you put someone in charge of footage after that?
I honestly can't remember. I do know we were towards the end of our schedule, but I know I'll never make a mistake like that again. So I will.
Can anyone still see that film anywhere? Is it?
It's around. It's been
curious to see that scene now.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years. I'm sure if you found me, there's ways to find it. Like I don't really have.
What was it called?
It's called The Vicious Circle.
The Vicious Circle.
Yeah, it was a film about bullying and bullying pre-Facebook, which was funny. Yeah. Just pre-Facebook, so it was a very different portrayal of that world. Yeah.
And another thing that you talk about in your speeches is quiet leadership as well. So what is the difference between quiet leadership and regular leadership?
That's exactly what we were just saying. It's egoless leadership. It's not that you're like, hey guys, it's good. Right. It's you're still being a good strong leader to a group, someone who's reliable, someone who's going to be there if stuff goes wrong. But it's about leading without that ego. And you'll often find that the ones who are leading with an ego are just visibly in their physicality and how they talk and everything a lot louder. That's the only way you can kind of describe it.
So what would the other version of leadership be then? If a quiet leader is like the leader that you're describing, like would a regular leader?
I mean,
you know what I'm asking, right?
Yeah, I think so. But it is just that. It's like if you're leading with I think there's two aspects of it. You're either leading with an ego or you're not. And so the not leading with an ego is what I call sort of a quiet leadership, because it is less boisterous and it is less charge. It's much more about stuff in the room. Okay, guys, here's what our plan is. Can I hear from all of you? Awesome. Here's where I want to support you. Here's where I want to support you. Now go out and do it. Right?
Can you be a good leader if you're shy?
Yeah.
And what are some ways you can kind of get over the shyness and become a good leader?
Sharing the load and delegating, I think, is a huge thing. So, like, let's say you aren't a good face for whatever it is. You're in charge of something like the Restless Millennial, but maybe you're not the guy to do this. Right? Then you get someone who is a good speaker and talker who can do the interviews. Or get someone to do that and over time learn how to do it yourself from them. Just because you're the person in charge doesn't mean you need to be the face of the organization.
Think of leadership, that's what they think of. Like,
well, and that goes back to the
super extroverted, and
that goes back to the ego versus non-ego. So, can a person who's shy, who's not great at public speaking or being the face, still be in charge of something or make something happen? Yeah, absolutely. Just surround yourself with the right people. And if you're wanting to learn from them in order to how to do that, then learn from them. Be open about that. Hey guys, like, I'm not so good with the public speaking, but you seem to be really great at it. Stefan, can we talk about some of that? Maybe the next time there's an opportunity to do a speech, I can do it. Maybe or part of it or something like that.
Go at your own pace, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So another thing that I know you're a fan of because I read it on your website is keeping a journal.
Yeah.
And do you often write in a journal?
Yeah, almost every day.
Every day.
I won't lie and say that it's every day, but
what is the reason you do that, and like how does it help?
Yeah, it's something I've done off and on since I was about 15 or so. But recently, within the last few years, I've just found an immense benefit to doing it. And over the last year, I've been doing it almost daily. So literally. And what I think is amazing about it is you start to actually look at your life as quite special.
Right.
Because we miss that all when we're going through it. We miss the sort of mundane aspects of our life and the ordinary special things that happen every day. A conversation like this could just easily be forgotten once I go back to my regular life. But, you jot it down and it's like, oh, it was something. And when you start to take the time to recognize how special your life is and how active your life is, you start to feel better with yourself. And feeling better about yourself comes that confidence.
Right.
With confidence comes the ability to now actually make things happen. It's like you start to realize that when looking back over a journal, man, I've done a lot. When that negative self-talk starts that says, you're not good, you're not talented, and you'll never amount to anything, well, look back over your journal and see if that's entirely accurate.
So what kind of things do you write in a journal? Like, I know maybe like some people who have never done journaling before would be like kind of confused as to like what they should be writing.
Yeah, I'm all about recording it. I would love when I'm gone, someone to actually have a full idea. You don't necessarily have to do that because maybe you don't want to have a journal that has all your thoughts, the good and the bad, everything that happened to you, the good and the bad. Maybe you do just want to keep it positive. And for a time, I just kept a gratitude journal. Which worked for a while, and then I was like, I want to include some of the bad stuff as well. I don't want this to be a censored version of my reality. But you can write about all of it. You can be grateful for your day and still talk about what's frustrating you and get that off your chest. You can freestyle and just have random ideas. I know people who their journals look like a sketchbook because it's literally just phrases and ideas, and they get all that stuff out. And often when you sit down to actually do that and get that stuff out, your mind is much more clear to focus on this stuff because you've taken the time to just kind of like declutter.
So does it kind of help you with goal setting, would you say?
Big time. I was looking back over a journal entry a few years ago, and it was around New Year's, so it was a lot of resolutions and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking about the year that had just passed. And in this one sentence, I said, this year I will perform for the first time internationally. That's all I said. And I didn't know how or why or what. I was just like, this year I'm going to perform in another country, basically. 3 months later, I did a 7-city tour in Arizona. And I had no idea that was going to happen at the time. So does it? And it was only when looking back at that I was like, holy crap.
Were you looking back at it often?
No, not at all. Yeah, sometimes I do, but not then I wasn't. But again, when we actually put these things in writing, it brings it from the subconscious to the conscious, and it just becomes something. You start to notice the opportunities. Some you might be walking down a street and see that sign on a post that is now, oh, that makes so much sense to me because today I consciously wrote something in line with that, which otherwise we tend to ignore all the signs, all the opportunities, right?
So it's not even something you were thinking about, it kind of just fell into place?
It fell into place, but it also came out of, conscious working towards it. I had videos on YouTube of my performing, and a company randomly found me in the States, a production company, via those YouTube videos and flew me out.
Wow.
But again, there was a lot of fear with that. I'd never done anything, but again, because it was a goal and because it was something I consciously brought up as a goal, I went for it. And that started a whole professional performing career.
Was that, which performance was that? Was that the Jerry Lewis?
Yeah, it was, I'd done a Jerry Lewis impersonation of one-man show, and I had uploaded that to YouTube, and then I was flown out to do a professional tribute show with a full band and everything, and as a paid performer, as a paid actor, and then that just kicked off a whole career for me.
That's amazing. Yeah. The power of journaling, it's crazy.
Yeah, well, journaling, it'll help you get perspective on your goals, your life, the good and the bad, and it just helps you kind of get it all out. It's like a therapist that doesn't say anything,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you're just kind of like talking to yourself.
Yeah. And no one needs to read it.
Right. Unless you want to show off.
Yeah. But and you don't have to read it. All my journals are locked in a chest. It's not like I go home every Friday night and I'm like, it's time to look through all my books.
Time to evaluate the week.
Yeah.
Anyways, what role does goal setting play in your life? Do you, when you're setting a goal, do you use the journal as a way to kind of keep progress, or are there some other ways that you kind of, make sure you're on the right track towards achieving a goal?
Yeah, I use, I do a lot of to-do lists.
Right.
I actually use an amazing app that you would love if you don't know it already, called Trello.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's great. I use it a lot. I just try to manage the milestones with whatever the goal is. If it's a big goal, it's like, okay, what do I need to do by this date? What do I need to do by this? I made a podcast not that long ago, and it was a narrative episodic documentary style podcast. So there was a lot of work with that. It's like, okay, by this date I want to have these interviews done. By this date I want to have this number of episodes made and ready to go. Journaling for me is a little bit more of a storytelling aspect right now. So what I'm doing with that is literally just sort of recording my life as is, and that includes the goals and ambitions.
Do you find that the journaling helps you like with public speaking?
Oh, interesting. I've never thought of it that way. Like just in terms of storytelling and everything.
Just in terms of like the storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it does, and I'd be interested in kind of looking back on past journals as a way to sort of draw upon potential stories. I mean, even just that story about the sort of performing internationally. I mean, that's something I include in my talk and all that sort of thing.
What I'm thinking is like you get used to like structuring, like you're writing about your day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're structuring as beginning, middle, and
exactly.
end. I feel like that would make it easier to kind of like tell a story to an audience.
I think in general it helps you become a better storyteller,
right.
You know, which is an aspect of leadership, you know, that many leaders have, you know. Mm-hmm. They're good storytellers, they're good ralliers, you know, and that sort of thing. So totally, I think I've never really looked at it that way, but I think there's benefits in that regard for
awesome.
sure.
So before we wrap up here, I just want to ask you about the Jerry Lewis show.
Sure,
you're doing, it's really interesting. I've never seen anything like it out there.
Yeah.
So why Jerry Lewis? Has he been like a big role model to you?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Lewis is was such a complicated figure. Because I think in his later years he became a very polarizing person. But when he was 20, he was one of the most famous people in the world before Elvis Presley and the Beatles and all that. There was a mania around him and Dean Martin as a comedy duo. And the show I tour around with right now tells their story about their friendship and the years that they were together. But I started out, I mean, I was a fan of Jerry Lewis. He did the muscular dystrophy telethon. He raised money for muscular dystrophy. So from a young age, I was watching his telethon every summer.
Right.
And I didn't know who this guy was. And then I found his comedy and all that sort of thing. And when I was about 20 years old, I realized that I could start performing professionally by touring to retirement homes and bringing, what would they like? Well, they'd like, a nostalgic thing that they can remember, So I created this little 45-minute one-man show that I toured around to retirement homes and I would perform for them. And that eventually led me to, getting gigs on the theater circuit and becoming a professional entertainer. But I still do the retirement homes every now and then. It's
how
very
have the
rewarding.
residents kind of responded to it?
It's funny because I published an article on this about performing for retirement homes because... when I was doing it when I was 19 and 20, it was more of an impersonation. And it was more ego-based. It was more about me building a career for myself as a performer and me showing off all the physicality I could do as Jerry Lewis and all this sort of thing. And as I grew older and I started learning from some of my performing mentors and all that sort of thing, I realized that changing the show to a bit more of a tribute, again, being Nick on stage and telling the Jerry Lewis story and interacting with the audience more and sitting down with them and sort of taking them back to 1946 and sharing in those memories with them created a much more rewarding experience for myself as well as them. So I changed the show over time to sort of become less of an impersonation and more of a tribute show, which allowed me to share in the memories with the residents. And that's when I noticed the real improvement of like a response from residents, because it became much more about the nostalgia for them, as opposed to them just watching this 20-year-old kid trying to be Jerry Lewis. It became about me sharing in their memories.
So again, it circles back to the leadership.
Yeah.
To, it's taking the focus off of yourself, off of your ego, and shifting it towards like the people who you're...
Honestly, it seems contradictory because it's an egoic thing to say, but you will become more successful if you let go of your ego. 110%.
It makes sense.
Yeah. In I think in many aspects, including performing.
It's a great lesson to kind of share with people.
Yeah.
And so before you go, I asked this one question to all of my guests. Well,
sure.
I'm going to start asking this question to all of my guests. You're the first one I'm going to ask this
Okay,
to.
Great.
How do you want to be remembered when you leave this earth?
I
know it's a deep question.
It is a deep question. The thing is and I hope I remain this way. I want to be so focused on living my life and trying to make it the best that it can be that's not something I'm trying to necessarily work towards, right? Is leaving a legacy. I think if you're focused on fulfilling your potential and your true nature, whatever that is, then you are going to naturally leave a legacy, and that's what you'll be remembered for. Is, I guess, in general terms, you know, I'd like to be remembered as being somebody who maximized on not only their potential, but the potential of people around them, helped others realize their potential, helped others build a legacy for themselves. I hope whatever my legacy is left in, you know, the performances that I've done, the talks that I've done, the writing that I've done. I mean, I guess I am concerned about a legacy in the sense that that's why I journal, you know, and that's why I write, so that my thoughts and everything are left behind. They're out there. But at the same time, I just want to be focused on the present and what I'm doing right now. And if anything, that's what I'd like to be remembered for, is like Nick just bulldozed in, did everything he could, and then peaced out. You know?
Came here, did what he could,
Yeah,
and left.
exactly.
I think that's a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
You don't put too much pressure on yourself.
No, yeah. It goes back to what we were saying. You're
Right.
going to change and evolve.
Exactly.
So if I'm focused at you right now at 28 on what my legacy is going to be, oh man, that's going to change a ton.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just focus on 28.
I think it's where people go wrong. They focus too much on, you know, I have to be this, I
Yeah,
have to
exactly.
do this, I have to do that.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of do the best you can and just go with the flow, like you
Grow
said
with
at
the flow.
the top
Yeah,
of the show.
yeah, exactly.
Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on
Man,
the show
thank
today,
you very
Nicholas.
much.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
And how can people get in contact with you if they want to, you know,
Yeah.
ask you about your show or...
Sure.
you know?
You can go on my website, I'm nicholasarnold.com. That's I'm with no apostrophe, nicholasarnold.com. And then Twitter at Nicholas Arnold. And you can find me all from there.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks, Nicholas.
Awesome. Thank you,
Keep
guys.
hustling, guys.